So thank you, Lior. We can make questions if any.
Yes.
So, sort of going off what you just said when you concluded, do you have any advice for people who are maybe working in a certain field but then thinking of sort of like deviating from that well-established path and doing something that, you know, other people haven't really done before, is not thought to be important yet? And can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't predict the future, but I look at my graduate students now and the way they think and what they talk about, and I'm certain that what I'm seeing is that what's going to be the topic of conversation 20 years from now is just not being discussed today. It's not being talked about. It's not being thought about. So I'll give just maybe a few examples that I can think of. So, for example, in a lot of areas that I work in, where computational biology, where computer science is interacting with biology, a lot of the really exciting directions and data sets are being developed and being put together outside of traditional academia, also often outside of the United States. For example, we don't have a national healthcare system in the United States, so collecting organized, curated data sets on people's health to correlate with the genetics and so on is very difficult here. It's a lot easier in Europe. There's a lot of companies doing very exciting research in computer science now, and machine learning. That's not being done in universities. Actually, I would say that in the last 5 to 10 years, it's just been an exodus of even tenured faculty in computer science departments going to work for companies like Facebook or Google. So I think that's, something where we might look back 20 years from now and go, I mean, that was really silly of people to just be so focused on careers in academia, calling decisions like going to work for Google some sort of alternative outcome for their career. Not at all. I mean, might be very, looking back in 20 years, you might go, I mean, it was kind of weird to be staying in academia if you were, in that area. I see other issues like that. I mean, I'm really happy that people are talking about sexual harassment on our campus right now, much more than they used to. I personally witnessed horrible things growing up in academia, in mathematics, which I had almost no women, and being harassed constantly. But I see other groups of individuals that are not being talked about, a lot nowadays, and I think in the future they will be talked about. We don't talk about the fact that we really, I don't think, talk about it hardly at all. There's essentially no African Americans in our scientific communities at places like UC Berkeley. I don't see anybody in this room. I don't see hardly any people in this whole building. And I think that's just, it's crazy when you think about it. And it's something that should be discussed in the newspapers all the time. We don't see that. I bet that'll change. So I don't know, on every issue. I was really happy to see someone today talking about educating children. I have kids now, and I see that as well. I kind of, if I was young now, I might go, and do that. I just think education of children is really, really important, and we really need PhDs doing that. And my kids at school, there's a science teacher now who's a recent PhD graduate from UC Berkeley. She's amazing. I wish all the teachers were like her. And that's a cause I believe in and that I don't think is being discussed enough. So I think there's lots of exciting things, but people should just constantly think about what am I not hearing? Yeah. Yes.
So you talked about the Bayesian rule. Actually, I had to wait to have a college education in physics to hear about it.
Yeah.
If you were to discuss ways to teach it before, or to at least spread this knowledge before, what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, it's a great point you're making. There's actually a number of different things to say. The first is that Bayes' rule is taught as part of statistics, and there's just been generally a lack of statistical education and statistical thinking taught at all levels of education, from school to university and so on. I actually think these concepts should be introduced to children, not just at university. One thing we did here is in Math 10 now, which is taken by, I think, close to 700 or 800 freshmen intended biology majors. We teach this now to freshmen. We didn't used to do that, so I think that's really good. In my group, I have biology graduate students come in and we discuss these things, and I encourage them to take courses and learn statistics. I think that fluency in these sort of ideas is just going to be an essential part of being an educated human being in the future. But there's certainly not enough of it, and I lament all the time when I see people, not just not knowing these things, but not being interested. I think it's a really huge problem, and I think that just has to change. Yeah.
I want to say something about Math 10. So since
Yes.
you left, when did you leave?
Well, I'm technically on leave of absence. I left in January. So yes.
It's a disaster. You
Yeah.
have to come back. Or you have to,
Well-
or not officially leave. And I think
Yeah.
from what I've heard, I'm not teaching it, but this is sort of what people are saying. And I think I would encourage you or people who know this stuff to figure out a way to teach this, right? Because
Yeah.
you're a gifted teacher and that's great, but there must be a way that we can make this standard for the freshmen to learn. I mean, it's a big goal here at Berkeley, but somehow,
I hear you, and the problem is not just at Berkeley, but everywhere actually, is that this is actually all Berkeley's fault in a way. Berkeley formed a statistics department in late 40s, early 50s. Founder of the Berkeley Statistics Department was Jerzy Neyman, a great supporter, by the way, of Abraham Wald, as opposed to the famous statistician Fisher, who despised Wald because Wald was a mathematician. And what happened in Berkeley is Berkeley formed one of the very first stat departments in the country. There were no statistics departments really to speak of before then, or not very well-known ones. And the reason it was formed is there was essentially a split between the mathematicians and statisticians. Mathematicians considered statistics to be lesser math, looked down upon it, if I may paraphrase, maybe it's more complicated than that. As a result, in many universities now, the faculty that teach freshmen mathematics are math professors. Most of them do very theoretical work, and I venture to say do not actually know or have not learned Bayes' rule, let alone more complicated statistics. And that's really the reason we've had difficulty also at UC Berkeley in this particular course, and that it's been a difficulty elsewhere, is that the statistics faculty maybe are much more qualified in their from their own research and their own teaching experience to do courses like this, are not servicing the number of students. I mean, that's the whole logistics that the math departments are good at and experienced in. So this disconnect that's due to the divorce of these fields many years ago needs to be reconciled. I actually have hope for our campus, and I can still say ours. There's talk of a new data science group forming between computer science and statistics. So I'm hopeful that things will be better, and I'm glad I started the course here because I do think it's the right thing. But yes, there is a problem in finding people who can teach this, at all levels, from schools to universities and graduate schools. It's just a universal problem.
so I have a
Yeah.
follow-up question. So I don't know if you've taught yet at Caltech, but some of us have this impression that the undergraduate population there is extremely sophisticated mathematically. Are they sophisticated in statistics?
Well, I definitely agree with the first statement, having been an undergrad there. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, so Caltech, along with MIT, is kind of a top technical school. Neither had statistics departments historically.
The students know it.
And at least when I was a student, the answer was no. And in fact, the way it was taught is basically, it was sort of, again, it was kind of it looked down upon field in the sense that it was expected that you would just pick that stuff up doing your data analyses during physics, let's say. There was one statistics course taught by the math department. However, in the last couple of years, both MIT and Caltech have made serious efforts to actually hire statisticians and create statistics groups. So at Caltech, that's happening in a new department called Computing and Mathematical Sciences. At MIT, they have a new statistics initiative. They've hired a lot of statisticians. So today, I would say their students are not that aware, or they just haven't been taught statistics. But I expect that will change in the next decade in both those schools for the better. But it's going to be a long process, unfortunately.
Okay, if there are no further questions, let's thank you again.